Fue 4 final, ¿no?
Lo que hago es pego la dinámica al final.
So we're a little, the Spanish slide, we need to go a little forward in the Spanish. Three slides more. Yeah. So this is where we left off before lunch. So I'll go to the next slide. So this breaking apart the data that I just showed for the 48 children, that 48 group is made up of 33 children that met LOBAS's 87 criteria and 15 children that met ICASS criteria. So you see of those children, 20 of the 33 LOBAS children met best outcomes, and 13 of the 15 in meeting ICASS criteria met the best outcomes. I'm going to, oh, by the way, I'm going to go for maybe 20 minutes finishing up the data, and then Victor is going to briefly translate that and then kick off the hands-on portion by reviewing a case study, and then we'll go to a true hands-on activity where we'll divide you into groups to work on some objectives. And also, by the way, we now have the famous Carol Riedessel, whose data you saw earlier today from the language matrix, and she's now in the audience. But I see her shaking her head, so I won't make her stand up.
With that, say hi.
She's going to hide. Now she's beginning to share. So if we look at LOBAS's IQ data, to now look at the specifics a little bit more. From the 1987 study, we see LOBAS had two different outcomes with his two groups, both of which starting around an IQ of around a 50, and the group that got intensive treatment ended up averaging an IQ above 80, and the group that got low intensity had also gained IQ, but now was only above a 50. And our data now, replicating LOBAS's here with those 48 children, if we divide them into two groups, this is the averages of the two groups. We see that the group that averaged above 80, their IQ rose from that 84, I think it is, to 104. And the average of the lower functioning group at intake that started with an IQ below 50, their IQ raised up to an average of 90. This, I should say, by the way, I could truly consider this social validity, because in our program, as much as we work hard to push families to go get an evaluation, we purposely make it a true external and independent evaluation. We don't direct the families to which center they have to go for their evaluation. And we don't direct those evaluators about which IQ tests to select, but we do require that the families get both an IQ test, an adaptive test, a language test, and a diagnostic test, and that the older children get a school achievement test. So this is all external social validity data with all the potential problems it has. And then if we go to the control groups out in the regular field of early intervention, you see there's a number of potential control groups to look at. There's two older TEACH studies from Catherine Lord in 1989, 1982. Those are highlighted by the squares. Oh, maybe I shouldn't try to do that. So one TEACH study here, raising from below 60 to above 60, and one TEACH study staying about flat at around 80. And then we see more recently We see Smith doing a study of low-intensity behavioral treatment in 2015. So he solicited behavioral programs to submit data, all of which their treatment hours were very low on average for the children. And so that's the closed circle here. And that's starting at below 60 and going up to around 65. We see the Lovas comparison group down here. And then we see the early start Denver model, their control group starting roughly at 59 and going up to about 66. And their treatment group starting at about 61 and going up to 78 on average for their group. So we look at that as kind of the context for what to expect out of early intervention. And then these are the three Lovas's intensive group. This one, our group of kids who started with an average below 50, and our group of kids who started an average above 80. And so I've got the gray square is marking off the low range of IQ, and above the gray square is 85 or higher, so scoring within one standard deviation of the norm or higher. So we also have, as I mentioned, the students are getting full-scale cognitive assessments and language assessments. Some of this data still has to be collected and analyzed. And we also have a study of Victor's and Javier's published in 2013 of treatment in Barcelona with your group of 24 children, was it? Yep. So this is the learning accomplishment profile data, which I had already shown earlier. And what the learning accomplishment profile is a set of developmental milestones from birth to 72 months of age. So here's the scale. So the highest score you can get is 72 months of age. So it's essentially normed for children up to the age of their 6th birthday. And it's broken into 8 domains. And so in each area, gross motor, fine motor, pre-writing, cognitive, receptive, expressive, self-care, and social. What Javier and his statistics that I still want to learn was able to show was dividing in each domain, finding the kids, all the kids in the dashed lines who started at intake above the midpoint of the group, and comparing them with all the children who started at baseline below the group in terms of developmental age, what their developmental trajectories were. So you see all their individual data here in the receptive, for example. And then this is a line of exponential best fit. I forget which formula it was, that projects the average trajectory for the low group and the high group in each area. And so you keep in mind, this is developmental age for each child. And you see that strong same effect that you saw with our data, and that difference in projected outcomes for the children starting with a lower score compared to the children starting with a higher score. And is there anything you want to add to that?
You want me to jump to frequency?
Let's do a few other things.
What is the scale there? Which scale is that? Is it IQ or what? What is it? Related to all?
The ELA, Early Learning Accomplishment Profile. Bueno, entonces, las últimas diapositivas que ha presentado el doctor Larsson hacen referencia a la comparativa de estudios inicialmente.
Sure.
Sorry, Victor assumed I wanted him to translate, but actually to answer your question, I'm jumping forward to the learning accomplishment profile. We're almost there. It's going to take a while.
One 164. 167.
It always goes back to the beginning for me. So I don't know how to.
100 and the number of
Is that right?
No queremos ir a una
Yeah.
queremos ir a 160.
Slide keeps going back to the beginning where it changed the year.
Pero voy a dar
We won't try to move it around anymore, but we will since 160. But while Javier's trying to position this for me, the lab is a set of developmental milestones. So we're measuring the child on 564 different developmental milestones from birth to age of 6, divided into the 8 different areas. So what this is giving is a developmental age. So here at baseline, this child, who on the right is 48 months old, in the area of gross motor, his average development is 14 months. In the area of fine motor, it's 12 months. In the area of pre-writing, it's 15 months. So these bars are spread around the average to show kind of the error in the estimation. So those lab scores were, which now I hesitate to go back to your graph, but what those lab scores were showing was the growth in developmental age across the 2 years of treatment that each of those children experienced. So they're different from an IQ score, and instead they're, again, comparing the child to his developmental age. And was there anything else you wanted to say about your study with Javier?
Okay. To see something.
So we'll just proceed from there. Maybe in the interest of time, I could just let you then go on to review what I just said.
Okay.
But I hesitate to have us try to go back to the data. It's going to take a while to get back to the base, it'll cause problems.
¿Quieres ir a acercar?
Sí que a volver a las iniciales. Pero bueno, puedo tirar así, ¿no? No, sin cerrar, pero bueno. Sí, bueno, ya.
I apologize, the computer's responding differently than it did this morning.
Bueno, pues, bueno, las últimas diapositivas que ha estado presentando el doctor Larsson y hubo las anteriores con las que acabó esta mañana, tienen un poco referencia a toda la base científica que hay detrás del proyecto, las comparativas con grupos control y otros estudios. También ha estado hablando de que mayormente la comunidad reconoce como elementos de impacto desestandarizados que muchas veces a nivel conductual no acaban de ser herramientas completamente sensibles, pero que al final aportan una validez social. Por eso es importante el hecho de poder desarrollar evaluaciones externas que puedan validar los resultados que tienen las intervenciones que practicamos. Como evaluación externa me refiero pues una evaluación por parte de un profesional diferente del proyecto que va a evaluar de forma ciega al niño sin estar potencialmente desviado de lo que está haciendo. Entonces, uno de los datos que he presentado antes es la comparativa con aquellos grupos donde los padres habían sido entrenados, a diferencia de los grupos donde no había sido entrenado. Y entonces, aquí he empezado esta tarde como haciendo una comparativa entre tres estudios diferentes. Por un lado, el estudio de Logas de 1987, con un total de 20 de 33 como best outcomes. También hace una comparativa con XF. People in the school, right? Ese es uno de los estudios que presentó anteriormente. Era un estudio donde los niños eran mayores, estaban comprendidos entre los 4 y los 7 años, y era un protocolo centrado en el colegio, parte del colegio y parte de otras. Era sobre los estudios que había hablado anteriormente. Y esos son los datos que presentan really new, right? At least for most of us. Son los datos que presenta del centro que lidera, donde realmente pues, el nivel de resultados es muy grande. Volviendo atrás, cuando antes estaba presentando sobre las gráficas, hacía comparativas sobre cuántas horas de supervisión habían tenido los niños, cuántas horas de terapia, cuántas horas de formación de padres. Entonces, bueno, esos resultados son como clínicamente muy significativos con respecto a lo que ya había, que ya era significativo en sí mismo. Aquí un poco mostraba las diferencias entre el grupo experimental y el grupo control, tanto de LOAS en 1987 como los actuales en el LOAS Institute MindWest, donde hay una comparativa clara. Sí que es verdad que los baselines son diferentes para cada grupo, muchas veces diferentes, es difícil, pero el impacto de las intervenciones se muestran como incluso más significativos. Los datos son extremadamente positivos desde un punto de vista de investigación, porque bueno, creo que lo que está haciendo el doctor Larsson es superar algo que ya era muy difícil de superar. Y creo que el impacto es terriblemente grande. Sí, además, hacemos comparativas con otros estudios, como por ejemplo, cita el estudio del doctor Christian Smith en 2015, donde hay un estudio de baja intensidad. Por ejemplo, pues, el modelo Denver, que corresponde al... realmente los resultados que se están mostrando con respecto al Global Institute MyWest realmente son muy significativos desde el punto de vista empírico, científico, y creo que lo interesante detrás es como, bueno, ¿qué está haciendo el doctor Larsson diferente de lo que los demás podemos estar haciendo? ¿No? Y creo que gran parte de lo que ha presentado esta tarde, esta mañana, durante toda la mañana, lo demuestra. Es decir, el nivel de especificación que tiene cada uno de todos los ámbitos en los que él toca, desde entrenamiento de terapeutas, formación a padres, formación de supervisores, cantidad de horas, nivel de supervisión sobre el staff. Él no lo dijo, pero lo estoy diciendo yo, ¿no? ¿No, Javier? Entonces, una de las cosas que me estoy dejando de explicar todo el rato es que aquí en realidad estos datos están tomados sobre puntuaciones de coeficiente intelectual que al final pues aportan validez social al trabajo que estamos haciendo. Es decir, el hecho de que alguien externo esté dando estas puntuaciones, incluso él hacía esta mañana una pequeña broma / reflexión en la que aún que los niños no están presentando síntomas compatibles dentro del espectro del autismo, se siguen dando diagnósticos de autismo. Es como, bueno, no muestra comportamientos compatibles, pero sigue teniendo el diagnóstico de autismo. Por lo cual, hablaba que en Estados Unidos puede ser como muy difícil la retirada del diagnóstico. Vale, y aquí hacía referencia a un estudio de Javier y mío, donde básicamente el trabajo más importante es el de Javier desde el punto de vista de tratamiento de datos, donde realmente a través de esta prueba que ha explicado ahora sobre el Early Learning Accomplishment Profile, es una herramienta que evalúa a los niños en 8 áreas y evalúa desde los 0 a los 72 meses. Las áreas en las que evalúa, si lo veis arriba, es como motricidad fina, prescriptura, cognitivo, lenguaje receptivo, expresivo, hábitos de autonomía y socialización, donde realmente las medidas son muy significativas para un grupo de 24 niños. ¿Vale? Bueno, y luego sí como relativamente rápido. ¿Tenéis alguna pregunta para el doctor Larsson? Any question for him? Okay. So we should try to get to your... Yeah. Oh, but we need to... Tenemos que ir... ¿Qué número de mira. ¿Tengo el número? ¿Qué pedí el número? ¿Here? Ya. ¿Ya tienes? Oh, it worked.
So actually, we ran out of time to go through the variety of other measures, but the social validity measures that I was showing are just one small piece. You've also seen some of our individual single subject studies, and then we're tracking their children's progress in the curriculum, their children's progress against developmental norms, the children's progress against outcome objectives, specific behavior objectives, 6-month benchmark objectives, videotapes of their social responsiveness to their parents, and several other measures. But we don't have time to go through all that today. And we're going to move now to, again, kick off the hands-on portion. Victor's going to review a case, And then after that, we'll move to work on developing a short-term objective using some of the principles we've discussed.
So, unfortunately for you, it's my time to speak in English, okay? Both for the ones who are able to speak in English and the ones who are not able, so people to speak English. First of all, sorry for I'm not used to speaking English for so many people, so if at any time you need any explanation or something that I need to explain again, just let me know and I try to do my best. But I don't promise to improve in my second explanation, okay? So, as Dr. Larsson was saying, I'm going to present a case, a 2-year evolution, and I would like to present, or at least just to explain, and besides the case by itself, I just want to try to let you know the way that we usually proceed in terms of assessment and in terms of making decisions for planning new objectives, and since that point of view, be able to supervise weekly every single improve that the child is doing, and at the same time be able to keep working on his challenging behaviors. So hopefully I will be able to present a good case in terms of at least amount of change. This child has a ASD diagnosis, and he started the program back when he was 2.5. He was not able almost to talk. In fact, he didn't talk. He just made some sounds. He was able to follow some instructions when the environment was trying to help him. He has some manipulation of toys, but most of his time he was engaging in self-stimulatory behaviors. And when we attempt to try to set any kind of contingency in terms of enforcement after being requested for any single thing, any single request, he usually rejected to. When we had control over the reinforcement, he attempted to escape all the time. So at the very beginning, this is the curriculum assessment. This is a very amazing tool developed by Dr. Larsson and Kara Riddle. So this is a tool that we pass just before the beginning of the intervention, and we go and we assess it every 6 months. So there are like 862 items divided in 43 areas, and goes from very like very primary areas like attention, imitation, matching, basic compliance. Is it the first time you see it in Spanish? And some other more complex areas like I don't know, comprehension of inferential language, conversation, asking questions. So there's a first, I would say that 1/3 are like basic skills. Afterwards, there is a language and social skills, and at the end there are like skills of generalization, like self-control, duration of response, pre-academic skills, writing, maths, reading. So at the very beginning, this child just scored 14 items. It's supposed that, correct me if I'm wrong or if I need to, but this would be a child between 7 to 8 years would be scoring 90-100% of them. So we are not going to get an idea about his developmental age. We are just going to compare him with himself across time. Okay, so we are not with this tool. We are going to assess we are trying to assess very well the impact that we are having across intervention with him. Okay, and we are going to make sure if that when we set some objectives to review in 6 months' time, we want to make sure that if the increasement in the areas are related to what we are teaching and what we want to check is that if he is even scoring things that we are not teaching, but probably in an assessment, he's responding generatively, so he's responding to new skills without training. Okay, but we want to assess here what's the impact. So at the very beginning, at the intake, he just scored 14 items. What we were observing is that inappropriate behaviors, his rejection to respond was affecting him so much when we were trying to assess him. So what I would say is that, okay, probably the amount of skills that he had at that time were even more than 14, but behavioral issues were preventing him to score more. Is it clear? So behavior was clearly interfering. Behavior was clearly interfering. Okay, when we were trying to assess his skills, that probably we knew that he would, because his father or his mother was able to let us know, well, he usually is able to do it, but when we were going to assess it, he just wanted to go. You want to say something?
I was going to translate for you.
Okay.
Interfering.
Interfering. I knew how to say it, but I was just kidding. Thank you. Okay, so what we know is that, okay, if we are able to improve his behavior, he will be scoring in certain areas that probably right now he's not scoring, but it's not because of the lack of the skill. It's just because of lack of collaboration. Okay, so so concerning the lab, which is a tool that he has recently explained and talked about, he was 30 months old, and these are no.
Puedes usar el puntero del ratón.
¿Tiene?
No, pero del táctil.
Okay. Okay, so these are the different areas: most gross motor, fine motor, pre-writing, cognitive, receptive, expressive, self-care, and social. And this is his base scores in terms of developmental age. So he's 30 months old, but he's scoring 15 months of development for gross motor, despite this tool assess like a base, like a average, a basal line, but it gives us also a setting, which means that, okay, it helps us to identify if he's able to score some items that probably that he is able to pass, but he's not consistent responding. Okay, in this case, for this child, he seems to be very consistent between bases and settings. If you realize, all the scores are quite similar. Okay, so what means that he is consistent, but what we're observing is that probably he, at certain point when the task becomes kind of difficult for him, he just stops responding. Okay, no, but there's a kind of mistake here. No. Okay, so at the end, he's 30 months. He's 30 months old, but his average age is 12 months. So he is developing too. There's a mistake here. The ceilings are wrong. Yeah. So what we observe is that if we pass this test to a typical child, what we will observe is that if there is no difficulties in his development, his chronological age and his developmental age is quite similar. Probably there is a standard deviation about 6 months. You could say that. But if the child has a typical development, when he is 30 months old, his age of development is very similar to 30. Okay, so we could say that we could assume that every single month that that the child is growing up in terms of chronological age, a typical child is developing 1 month. Okay, so if we divide the chronological age per the developmental age, this number would be 1. With this child, it means that we could say that he needs 2 months and a half to develop 1 month. 2 months and a half of time to develop 1 month. Okay, so this is one of the data that we want to speed up or to increase, because this will tell us that he's learning faster than he used to do before. Okay, and these are the graph. This is his chronological age. Yeah, this is why the are wrong. Yeah. There's a mistake in the selling column, because for example, for gross motor, he's 15, but probably his selling is 24, and his fine motor is 10 and probably 14. So this column. But this is his profile at before we start the treatment. Okay, so what we observe is that all the areas are very different in each other, when in the typical child would be like very similar between them and very similar to his chronological age. Okay, so what we do is to make an exercise about what is the biggest thing that is interfering in his learning, and our hypothesis is just behavior. So what we write a clinical focus, we write like, okay, our main thing for the next 6 months is it depends on the child. With this child, what we decide is just to focus on compliance, consistency of response, because what we are observing is that if he was in a good mode of response, he was able to respond very well, but at the same time, 1 minute later, for any reason, he was in a bad mood and he was not able to respond anything. So what we wanted to do is just to balance his level of skills, to balance to make more consistent his responses. Okay. So, and one of the things that and how we are going to work on that is just basically on using an effective reinforcement, and to be very contingent. Okay, because at that time he was a child who was living in Japan. They were Spanish, but they were living in Japan. So family didn't have many relations in their environment. So it was the first child of the family, and he had quite inappropriate behaviors, but I would say that he didn't need to make big inappropriate behaviors, because he was reinforced even before. So one of the things that we observed, that as soon as we put him in the situation of do or die, it means that if you do it, you get the reinforcement. Otherwise, we will wait to get it later. His inappropriate behaviors increased so much overall in terms of intensity. Okay, so what we were saying is that the schedule of reinforcement for that child was not enough for him to learn by himself, or the environment, or make the environment an active variable of learning of his learning. So the first thing that we tried to do was to work so much on reinforcement. What we observed is that he was very the main kind of reinforcers that we could use with him were reinforcers that tend him to get isolated. What I mean is that if we could give him some toys, and he was going to go and manipulate them or kind of play with them. But if we were trying to interact with him just to make the situation funnier, he rejected that. So we were working so much, and you will see that after 2 years, there's one of the objectives which is still, okay, 75% of reinforcers must be social. So it's not just the fact that we have something that he is interested in, is we want to make him interested on us. Okay, so this has been one of the most difficult things with him, because what we have observed is that his speed of learning is at the end is very fast. He's able to learn anything that we would like to teach him, but as soon as that, but only if the reinforcement helps him to, is reinforcing because he does it by himself. Okay, ¿me seguís en español, más o menos? Sí, más o menos, ¿no? O hablo un minuto y explico. Hablo un minuto y explico. Niño de 2 años, ¿puedo? ¿Sí? Sorry, I'm going to speak a bit in English. In Spanish. Niño de 2 años y medio, empezamos la intervención. Queremos hacer lo primero que hacemos es una línea base, y una de las habilidades que utilizamos, una de las cosas que utilizamos es una prueba desarrollada por el doctor Larsson, que tiene 862 ítems repartidos en 43 áreas. Es una prueba no estandarizada, pero que nos va a dar, es una prueba curricular que nos va a dar una comparativa con él mismo a través del tiempo. Por lo cual, con estos datos no vamos a saber la edad cronológica del niño. Lo que vamos a poder saber lo vamos a poder comparar con él mismo, ¿vale? A través del tiempo. Y vamos a poder ver cuál es el impacto de la intervención a través del tiempo. Aquí podríamos decir, bien, ese niño empieza con 30 meses de tiempo, 30 meses de edad cronológica, él ha sido capaz de desarrollar 14 habilidades. Vamos a ver si en 6 meses ese crecimiento es un crecimiento proporcional, con lo cual seguramente no hay diferencia entre que el niño tiene intervención o no, o realmente está acelerando la cantidad de aprendizaje es alta. O sea, por encima de lo que él se está desarrollando. Otra de las cosas que pasamos, os digo que la columna de techo está equivocada porque está copiada igual, intentamos evaluar cuál es la edad de desarrollo en 8 áreas diferentes. Esa fina, esa es la prueba del Early Lab. Entonces, lo que vemos es que es un niño que para 30 meses de edad, su edad de desarrollo es aproximadamente sobre los 12 meses. Entonces, su velocidad de desarrollo es en 0.4. Lo que he explicado aquí es como, si nosotros tenemos un niño típico, un niño con un desarrollo típico, que no hay ninguna dificultad, lo que vamos a observar es que su edad cronológica y su edad de desarrollo están muy cerca, ¿vale? Tan cerca como si seguramente las dividiéramos para sacar a qué velocidad se está desarrollando ese niño, pues generalmente estaríamos hablando de que el número que va aquí es 1, ¿no? Este niño se desarrolla con 0.4 por mes, es decir, necesita 2 meses y medio de tiempo para desarrollarse lo que un niño típico se desarrolla en un mes. ¿De acuerdo? Esto lo pone en un índice de desarrollo, que es un dato que antes comentaba el doctor Larsson, en este punto de 38. Aquí entenderíamos que un niño con desarrollo típico estaría aproximadamente sobre el 100, por una desviación estándar que podría ser equiparable al cociente intelectual. ¿Vale? Entonces, lo que vemos es que, ya acabo rápidamente, que ese niño tiene, en las evaluaciones de la entrevista con sus padres, tiene más habilidades de las que es capaz de demostrar. Ya sabemos que las puntuaciones que nos está presentando, por ejemplo, aquí, seguramente él, como habilidad, ya tiene más que 14 ítems. Pero ¿qué pasa? Que cuando lo vamos a evaluar, no los puntúa. Y cuando vemos por qué no los puntúa, es decir, qué está pasando en el momento en el que sabemos que él sabe hacer algo y no lo hace, nos podríamos encontrar con problemas de autoestimulación. Pero lo que nos encontramos es problemas de conducta, porque lo que a él le cuesta es cuando el reforzador está controlado por otro, cuando él no tiene control sobre este reforzador, él deja la tarea. Entonces, lo que vemos es que aparentemente puede hacer cosas relativamente complejas si se dan las condiciones muy determinadas, pero que no es consistente en su respuesta, ¿vale? Por eso, desarrollamos como un enfoque centrado en sobre todo 2 aspectos, el cumplimiento y la consistencia de respuesta, y lo vamos a trabajar desde un punto de vista sobre todo de condicionamiento de reforzadores. Por eso, no vamos a ir tanto a que aprenda muchas cosas, sino que realmente sea consistente en la respuesta. Sus respuestas sean sean siempre iguales, más largas, más generalizadas, porque es un niño que después de 2 años, o sea, cuando veis algunos objetivos de los 2 años, de estos años después seguimos trabajando porque los reforzadores en un 75% tienen un componente social muy fuerte. Okay, so I can keep these are some of the objectives that we write for his first 6 months of training. There's one based on self-control. There's one based on basic compliance. And for example, for the self-control, we want just to make sure that he's able to stay just seated, not doing any kind of task, but just waiting for for example, we set an objective for being seated on the chair, but we also set objectives for being standing or sitting on the floor. Okay. One of the things that for us it's really important, and I think that in our practice it would be very necessary, is just to, when we write objectives and we deliver them to parents, to families, just to make sure that there's a mastery criteria. There's a how I'm going to assess these the mastery or not of these objectives. Okay, and I think that this is something that for sometimes and overall, when we just start working with the child, we don't really know. We cannot absolutely predict what is going to be happening in 6 months. And overall, when you have a profile that you see that the child is smart, you see that the child has some skills, but he's not able to respond consistently. So it's very hard sometimes to predict, because if you are able to improve his behavior, he will be able to perform much better than probably what you can predict. So across time, we have more data and we can predict better. Okay, but this is for me important. So it's really important. So in terms of self-control, we design an objective in factor 2, basic compliance. And one important thing is that in our focus is just compliance and consistency of response. So one of the things, besides the child has to be seated for a period of time, and we will move to reinforcement, we want to make sure that the child is able to do it for 5 times in a row. What I mean is that he's consistent in the response. Okay, and 3 times when he is standing or he is sitting on the floor. In terms of compliance, one of the things that we observed is that he was not responding. He was not doing incorrect responses. He was not responding at any time. He was just waiting. He was just living. But so one of the things that we wanted to decrease was exactly all kind of incorrect responses. But overall, this kind of escape behaviors where he was not giving us any response, or his response was not related to the request that we were asking for. So we wanted to decrease them until 5% at least, but at the same time he would be responding 90% of times. Okay. So for example, the mastery criteria here is we are going to assess this target at the end of the 6 months time. Okay, so what we are going to do is just to review his weekly data, and we are going to see if we are mastering this objective. One of the things that at the end we develop 25 objectives. Okay, and is it helpful? Do you want me to keep going? Okay. So in terms of challenging behaviors, we want to decrease them, and there will be at maximum 2 times per week. In terms of visual area, we want to make sure that he's not only going to respond, he will be responding in terms of of duration of the task. So he will be sorting he will be doing like 6 responses before he will go to reinforcement. And he will be able to do it as in 3D or 2D formats and in any kind of concepts like colors, format, shapes, letters, objects, okay? And the criteria will be at least 80% of times. In terms of nonverbal imitation, one of the things that we haven't mentioned is that the ELM would be like, tell me if I explain well. Dr. Rojas in his studies developed this test, which was the early learning measure, and is based on to identify 40 items in 4 different areas. Yeah, so 10 items per area that at the baseline the child is not able to respond. This is nonverbal imitation, receptive language, expressive language, and verbal imitation. So, and what we usually do is just to pass this test every 5 weeks. And we are going to make sure that the person who is running the assessment doesn't have any idea about the current items that the child has. So we are going to assess how if the child is developing generative responses, is developing to items that he is not being trained, and we want to see if he is able to respond correctly. Does it make sense? Okay. So what we are thinking is that one of our targets is that he will be able to score class in the nonverbal imitation for the ELM. It's exactly the same for the receptive language. And one of the things that we will see is that we want to see is in the weekly probes, we want to see that he's able to develop some kind of learning by himself. What I mean is that we are going to check every week if he's able to recognize new objects that probably we haven't trained. But what we are assuming is that if we are able to improve his behavior, there will be many things that probably we won't need to train him.
And just to clarify, that means that you are not going to be training the child on these areas, and you're going to make probes? Or
No.
We will be training and
we will train.
No,
we will train.
Okay.
We will train a receptive object label or color or whatever, but we will have an estimation about the objects that he already knows or that is, and every week we are going to check if we are going to probe and to see if items that probably before he was not able to recognize, he's able to recognize them. Okay? Because what we were suspecting is that if we were working, if he would be doing some matching task with generative responses, he will be able to increase his receptive language. Okay, so if he would be matching similar exemplars, he would be generalizing better, and it would be very easy for him to learn new items. Am I very fast? This is the same. And for the verbal area, the same. We design an item for verbal imitation and for expressive. What we were thinking is that child, despite of his difficulties at the intake, he would be able to learn very fast. Okay. So our goals for the first 6 months were ELM for verbal imitation, to pass the ELM for verbal imitation, and the ELM for expressive object label. And one of the items that we were expecting is that at least he would be saying he would be asking for it's like 12 demands per hour. So 25 in 2 hours and a half session. With this child, we started with 20 hours and we were increasing. He was quite young, so we started with 2.5 hours per two sessions of 2.5 hours per day from Monday to Saturday morning. So we were expecting him to develop some kind of minds per hour. Yes?
Yeah. You said that you, the assessment that you run at the beginning, the one developed by Dr. Larsson, is not for the sake of developing the curricula, but for the sake of controlling the child against himself in a 6-month period, right? Where is this curricula coming from?
Sorry?
Yeah, you said that, that's what I understood, that the assessment that you, of the child that you did at the beginning, the one where he...
The curriculum assessment?
Yeah. Through which you were able to say that the child had developmental age of 12 months.
This one?
Yeah, that one. Was not run for the sake of developing the curricula for the training, but just for comparing the child against himself.
So that's
in a 6-month period. Yeah. Then my question is, if that's true, where is the curricula for the training program coming from?
For the objectives?
Yeah. Do you understand? Or do I explain it?
No, I think.
There are many different measures of a child's progress, and each measure has its own strengths and weaknesses. So this criterion referenced assessment identifies 862 standard criteria objectives that a child could be programmed for.
Yeah.
But if we measured all of the 200 children we've treated over the past 15 years, we probably would find another 2,000 objectives that are written differently that we've also provided to specific children when we've individualized their treatment. So this standard curriculum assessment gives us a standard measure of progress that we compare against the child and against other children. But then, as Victor was just showing, a very nice set of customized objectives. These don't necessarily match up perfectly to the curriculum assessment. They may be larger in scope or smaller in scope or focused differently based on the child's individual needs. So these are customized short-term objectives that often, because we're aware of the curriculum assessment, we're writing almost the same thing here, but we may also be writing it in a different way based on the child's individual needs. And then the learning accomplishments, those are two different kinds of criterion referenced objectives that we're using to measure a child's progress. And then this, because those are both criterion reference, those don't compare the child to other children in terms of their development. This now gives us a developmental age. So now we're able to compare the child against standardized developmental trajectory. So this by itself is not a strong way of meeting all the child's needs, but it's very different and communicates very different information. And we see the supervisors may often draw off of this assessment when they're creating the individualized objectives. Because again, these developmental milestones carry different emphases than the pragmatic Lobos curriculum carries. And an additional feature of these customized benchmarks, as Victor was implying, is we're purposely setting these with a 6-month expectation. And every 6 months, we're evaluating against our prediction. Is this child mastering as many objectives and the level of objectives as we predicted he individually is likely to meet in 6 months in order to be doing well? Or is he falling short of our individualized expectations for him? Or is he exceeding our expectations for him? So again, the curriculum assessment doesn't tell us how far this particular child should get, but this is an exercise that the supervisors go through, and Victor's come up with some really nice, sophisticated objectives for this child that are specifically giving us feedback based on how well I thought this child could do in 6 months. Just in 6 months, we'll evaluate him and decide is he meeting that objective. And then we've got several other measures as well. And the ELM is an example of an additional measure that, again, is tangential to this set of benchmark objectives. So again, we're really trying to slice the child's treatment cake in as many ways as possible to make sure we're not overlooking an important dimension for evaluating his progress.
We have a question from Twitter.
Okay.
It might have been addressed already. It's from Mona. She says, what do they base their objectives from different areas on? Any particular tool?
That was my question.
Okay.
Yeah, and so again, the standard curriculum assessment is an attempt to identify all the common 862 objectives that we might work on with any child. And this child started with only 14 mastered. Another child might start with 300 mastered. So in 6 months, we're going to see progress on a different set of objectives. And very importantly, the clinical focus is yet another way to slice the cake, is stepping aside from specific objectives, really looking at what is the child's barrier to normal developmental trajectory. And so Victor's presented a nice analysis. So this focus then also will dictate, in addition to the curriculum assessment, which informs our thinking, and the developmental assessment informs our thinking, we're also looking clinically based on our observation of the child and our initial interactions with the child. We're deciding what do we think the overall focus of all the objectives should be upon in order to maximize his progress in the next 6 months. So it comes from everywhere and includes a shrewd analysis by the clinical supervisor based on years and years and years of experience.
Your experience. Well, so one of the things that we also program is in terms of play skills. We want to observe at least 20 different skills, different activities that he will be able to play at least for 3 minutes each, and he will be responding at least 80% of correct responses. So 8 out of 10 times that we will bring him to play by himself, he will be able to run at least three minutes of independent play by himself, not engaging or not leaving the situation. Okay. And at the same time, we ask as an objective, we ask parents at least to get one hour per week of training each. Okay. So at the end of this interval, we score 20 of these 25 items, and so we keep working in the same way. What we observe is, so I'm going to jump until 2 years later, okay? And I'm going to
Interrupt?
yeah.
We had a lot of material that we didn't get to earlier, but I really want to underscore this point if we go back, which I was just addressing. Again, we purposely set up this 6-month assessment with these focused, individualized objectives to evaluate the child's progress. And then what I had alluded to and didn't get a chance to really cover is our concept of dynamic programming. So we're expecting the clinical supervisor to learn from this. They predicted the child would get 80% of these objectives mastered, and he did. So their thinking was on target. Their priorities for this child is feedback. The fact that they mastered 80% of these objectives, we consider feedback that they are accurately understanding this child and he's making the kind of progress they make. If they're consistently, as a supervisor, low, if they're only mastering 50% of the objectives that they think the child should make, then their ability to plan treatment is weak. And if they're always mastering 100%, then they may, like traditional special education, be way too conservative about their ambitions for the child and not programming aggressively enough. So we, as an organization, we're looking for each supervisor to hit about the 80% target on the 6-month basis. And we follow that same logic on a weekly basis, that we are expecting when the supervisors identify daily targets, that the children are going to master 80% of the daily targets with confirmation by a separate staff person each week. And having this knowledge that this is what we're aiming at in 6 months, or on the daily targets, this is what we're aiming at today. I'm intending to master 80% of these targets today, is dynamic information feedback back to the staff that trains them to be more accurate in how they program on a daily basis, and also more accurate in how they program on a 6-month basis. And I can't underscore enough how that shapes your behavior. So instead of simply putting in your time, and every 6 months, I just tick off which objectives he's mastered without having any clear intent, or every day I just put in so many trials without any clear intent about what to master, both the staff's skills are much weaker. But when we hold them accountable to these clearly laid out expectations on a daily and 6-month basis, then we see much more aggressive and accurate programming, and the staff learning from the results of that programming. So we missed out on the opportunity to really show all that data, but it's a very fundamental part of our planning.
Part. So, as I was explaining, I'm going to explain, for not to make very long, just to make an overview about how was it the intervention for the first 2 years of treatment. In terms of the curriculum assessment, he scored at the intake, if you remember, 14 items. We were able to increase to 120. So he increased, as you said? Yeah, we increased 106 new items. In the second 6 months assessment, we increased 88 new items. So, for example, here what we saw is that at the very beginning he increased 106, and the second one 88. So what we did at that time is just to assess and analyze why was that. Why is there a decreasement of acceleration in his learning, and why? And as you were saying, there's no one assessment that is going to give us all the information. What we need to do is just to get big conclusions throughout many different resources like this or the ELAB, but overall concerning the amount of items mastered every week, amount of the percentage of goals mastered. So at that point, when one of the conclusions that we arrived at that, okay, this part we were able to increase so much his compliance, his good behavior. So in the second part, there was the amount of items that he had to learn were more. I don't know if I'm explaining well, but here in probably in the first 106 items that he mastered at the very beginning, probably, I don't know, I can just hypothesize, but probably 10 or 20 or 30 or 40, there were already in his repertoire, but he was not able to score because he lack of consistency. Okay, so as soon as we improve his behavior, he's scoring things that of course he's able to show consistently, but probably the skill by itself was already learned before. Okay, so what we see is that across time he's able to keep increasing his to be back to 111 and 102. So in 2 years' time, he's scoring 420 skills from the 862 total of the items. Okay, concerning, well, this was after 2 years. It was his profile after this in 2 years' time. So what we see is that he has mastered many or a big percentage of main areas. So, for example, exactly. So the foundational skills. For example, if you see that in the first, like attention, advanced attention, imitation, he's scoring very high scores in these areas. But as soon as we move for the more based on social areas and language, he's having difficulties. For example, in terms of spontaneous behavior, he needed a lot, and he still needs a lot of. If we help him to start something, he's able to continue and control his self-esteem, for example. But if he has to follow some contextual stimuli, it's hard for him to stop what he's doing and what he's doing by himself, usually some self-esteeming, and then move to what he's supposed to do. With this child, we have been working so hard with the family to try to let them know, or in terms of school inclusion, the child that has developed language so fast. It's a smart kid, and one of the things that I always try, not in these words, but in one of the things that I learned from Eric is that we need to pay attention to try to develop typical children, not smart kids with autism. You see like this, right? So that's for me. It's very clear. Like, okay, I can with, I don't know, 3.5 or 4, sometimes we can teach children to make additions, okay? But is this clearly fighting against his autism? Okay, so for example, with this family, we have been working so hard just to let them know that as soon as he goes to a group, his performance increases so much. Okay, because it's hard for him to okay. It's hard for him to follow a group situation. Let me finish the sentence. So in terms of the lab, across 2 years, his speed of learning has been developed. What we observe is that this is the average per area. and this is the increasement per area every 6 months. Okay, so what we see is that he's able to score, for example, in receptive or expressive or cognitive, which are three areas very related with the diagnosis. He's scoring very significant increasement in 6 months' time, or the social. Okay, so 2 years later, he's developing like 1.6, 1.7, 1.6, 1.3. So his DRI has jumped from 38 to 88, and well, his developmental age right now is, at that time, was like 49 months when he was 54. So we are getting close to in terms of at least this test, we're bringing him to the normal range of development with this standardized test.
And I haven't seen this data on this child before, but again, this is the kind of feedback that we get as a supervisor for the behavior analyst. So this rate of gain over 1.3 months per month is our standard. That's what we want to see. 1.3 is the average for all of our children. So if we're truly accelerating them and catching up, we are looking for this. So in addition to mastering 80% of benchmarks, this is what I look for as the behavior analyst supervisor. And again, we're also looking at all the other data. So looking at the data on the curriculum assessment, even though this isn't individualized, we're expecting, again, for all of our kids, to see an average of 90 objectives mastered every 6 months. So he's also tracking that very nicely. So we see all these measures that if Victor had called me in to evaluate his progress, I'd be saying, looks like you're doing fine. You obviously have more to work on, and this now is going to be your clinical focus, perhaps, for this child, because as Victor's saying, we could forget about spontaneity and focus on making him a great addition person, but that's just making him a smart autistic kid. And instead, how can we now retask analyze how we approach spontaneous performance to address that autistic challenge?
Yeah, I think that our challenge with him is everything related to social area. So he's a smart kid. He could be doing very complex things, but just by teaching him these very nice things, we are not treating his autism. So I think that's a good feedback about, okay, why, and this is the kind of analysis that we need to do, is that why we are not being, why we are not succeeding, why he's not scoring in certain areas that probably he has some prerequisites to be scoring, but when we do this, when we run these assessments, that we are failing. Okay, so
well, and my reaction would be you just still have more to do. So you've been making a correct amount of progress. Also, you've been mastering 80% of your 6-month benchmarks, but all of the complex language remains to be mastered, as well as the spontaneity. But we weren't expecting you to be in a race car.
And one of the things that, or the difficulties that we had at certain point was everything related to echolalia. So we are fighting quite hard against it because it helps him to get isolated. He prevents that kind of behaviors, prevents him to have a more effective social behavior. And when he is under some kind of a structure, he's able to respond. But as soon as something in the environment is not put in place. So I think that one of the things that we have to also to analyze is everything related to natural situations. Okay. Do you want to make a break?
Yeah.
A tea break?
2-minute break. 10-minute break, and then we do want to do our hands-on activity. That's good.
No, you have in English. You can ask. Well, I think that there's the one in English is here. If you, maybe you can find it, I can't. Okay.
Well, thank you all for coming back so eagerly. We have the Spanish slide of the steps in an objective. And speakers deciding whether we can find the English version. Is that English now on the Spanish?
No, this is the Spanish one, but I want to look for the number.
Sure. So what we thought we would do while we're straightening out our picture is a hands-on activity similar to some of the other days. Is we will have you split into groups and identify an objective that is of personal concern to you, skill, reduction or a development of a skill or a natural generalization objective. Just found that for that slide, and you know how to look for this in English. And this, I had gone through this slide earlier in the morning. You may just have to escape.
This is Spanish. This is Spanish, right?
Right. So you're going to have to escape out of this PowerPoint and put in the other one, if you can find it.
Yes.
Good.
No. Aquí la dejo adelante. Sí, en la 72.
And what we would like you to do in the groups of your own choosing is to take this as a general guideline. All right. And pick any section. Yeah, you have to do that. Pick any item out of these bullets or any combination of items and identify in the short-term objective of your own choosing which of these steps you're going to flesh out for that particular objective. So for example, to use a straightforward one, if you're teaching expressive adjectives and you're wanting to take advantage of one of these steps in our matrix programming, then identify a matching or imitation strategy for developing that skill without yet requiring expressive responding. Put those steps into your objective and then use the matching or imitation as a prompt for your actual expressive adjective program. So that would be just taking advantage of one of these steps to rework an objective you might have addressed without matching and imitation. And, or pick any of these other ideas for steps in developing an objective and address that in the skill program that you're interested in.
Para los en castellano también. Bueno, un poco la actividad de esta tarde. Aquí lo que hemos pensado era el hecho de que por grupos nos dividiríamos por grupos y escogiéramos en el entrenamiento de cualquier habilidad, que nosotros pensábamos coger uno de estos pasos y desarrollar un entrenamiento sobre ello, ¿no? Es decir, por ejemplo, si yo, por ejemplo, quiero trabajar sobre la combinación de múltiples términos sobre el emparejamiento de imitación. Bueno, pues si yo estoy trabajando sobre teorías espaciales, es cómo desarrollo el entrenamiento, cómo programo el entrenamiento desde el punto de vista de emparejamiento e imitación en las teorías espaciales, por ejemplo. Sí. Bueno, entonces es lo que queráis, ¿eh? Colores en cualquiera de los puntos. ¿Os parece bien? ¿Sí? ¿Pensáis que es algo que nos va a ayudar a practicar algo? Sí. Cojamos algo que queramos enseñar y esos son los pasos en los que un objetivo de adquisición sobre una habilidad podemos repartir, ¿no? Entonces, podemos coger cualquier habilidad que queramos, es decir, desde algo de lenguaje sencillo, algo más complejo, términos múltiples, y decir, bueno, yo voy a explicar cómo trabajaría, no sé, cómo introduciría, por ejemplo, el tercer punto, cómo introduciría distractores complejos en una matriz de términos múltiples. Pues bueno, no sé, si tú dijeras, quiero trabajar estructuras de sujeto-acción, que el niño reconozca, pues el perro come o la mamá plancha, ¿ves? Bueno, ¿qué? Es un grupo. El papá... Corta la expresión. La mamá juega fútbol. Las mamás se quieren mucho. Los papás juegan en la playa. Venga, pues por ejemplo. Perdón, volviendo a tu pregunta. En el entrenamiento de sujeto-acción, vale, ¿cómo puedo introducir distractores complejos para que la discriminación en términos de matriz sea más compleja? O sea real, una distinción real. ¿Sí? ¿Se entiende? Pues nada, juntaros por grupos naturales
¿Cuánto tiempo le das?
Okay, we just have 25 minutes. We just have 25 minutes, so we can spend like 10 minutes so at least to think about it and probably we can put it in count. Okay? Nos quedan 25 minutos, podemos gastar aproximadamente como 10 pensando el tipo de entrenamiento y luego ponemos en común unos 15 minutos. ¿Os parece bien? ¿Lo he apagado? Sí. No, le quiero enseñar lo de Twitter para responder. So what's
Yeah, no. But what I mean is that a very similar tool to so overall for the curriculum assessment. I think I do that. Okay, and then again, if we got a link to the language matrix paper, that would be another. Ah, no, estás con
¿Cuál es el criterio que utilizan? ¿Cuál?
The key thing is identifying which mode of the instruction the child excels in and that as a
Response over there. You're talking about mode.
Yeah, well, right, well, I can work with translation. The teacher is good at 5 o'clock this morning.
Auditory or
Pero tú puedes organizar
y objetos algo pero
trabajando para un de 3 meses pero lo bueno y en 3 meses mi modelo es si viene una familia que los padres no, yo sí tengo pero no en menos biología
Está muy claro, vaya.
Dime cosas que sean
Sure. But the ICM project is defined as a term in the one term.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left, so we can finish the discussion. I apologize for us having more material than we had time to cover, but I did now put on our overhead, I put my email address. Here again, I am somewhat disabled by the Windows computer, so I have to type @ instead of the @ symbol. And I put Victor's email address at the bottom. So you're welcome to contact either of us for further consultation on issues that you had with the conference. And if anyone would like to briefly volunteer a question or an idea that they had in response to our hands-on workshop, I'll entertain the question now.
¿Alguien lo quiere compartir? ¿Quiere hacer una pregunta sobre lo que habéis estado trabajando intensamente? ¿Va a hacer una actividad?
So tonight when Victor is flamenco dancing, you're welcome to approach him during breaks with questions. But other than that, we're done for tonight, so thank you.
We have some.
Oh, Javier has one.
Well, this is not my idea, it's just team effort here, but luckily I have regular notes, we just have to read a lot. So we decided to train 3 different colors and concentrate in the bullets on multi-mode programming, changing the mode of the response, and also the last bullet about making the response more complex and removing support on prompts and the momentum. So I don't know if we got there. So we have those three colors, red, green, and blue that we want to train. And we thought of starting with receptive or listener response, where we would present different colors. Toy. We would start maybe with cards at the beginning, and then the differentially reinforced selection. And subsequently, we may change to another response mode, which could be tacting or manding, using the either pointing or maybe changing subsequently the response mode could be vocal as opposed to a selection, and changing also the stimuli, making them more varied, using different toys of different colors, for example, and continue on to, as I said, tacting, manding, and eventually try to get to the generative expressive response or generative intravellular response, where we would ask, tell me or tell me blue toys or blue objects. We were not quite sure how to get to that point, where we get to that response that will have no visual support, if you wish. Well, nice. You got this far. Is there anything I'm missing?
It's okay.
Yeah, and I think I recall you started with a receptive for red, blue, and green. And so again, the logic that you'd be following here is that is a strong mode for the child, in that when you teach receptives two-dimensionally, so with cards, the child quickly masters those targets. Of course, I would be, and you mentioned generative a little bit later, my goal would be, if he is labeling two-dimensional stimuli, the colors, that it is generative. So if I show him a brand new set of two-dimensional stimuli, like say, for example, you're starting with balls and clothing and pictures of crayons, and he's receptively labeling those pictures, will he generalize, and those are with prompting, will he generalize to a novel category like cars and houses, and without prompting, showing that he's truly mastered the color labeling at that receptive two-dimensional level. So now you're ready to take advantage of that skill to teach a skill that's been challenging, like say the expressive mands or the expressive tags. So I'm thinking, I'm looking at a child and he's fairly mute, keeping in mind that I would also be working on a reinforcement for vocalization program. So now I have a child who has clear color preferences. Say with candy, he always likes the green and the red, but not the blue and the white candies. He likes toys that are certain colors. And what I want to do is ask for that, but I can start off with, again, the receptive task is he's going to label a card. He doesn't necessarily request cards, but he does prefer, we know, the M&Ms. I'll just stick with M&Ms right now for the sake of time. And so what can I do to turn a receptive into a prompt for requesting colors? So probably I'm going to think more in terms of behavioral momentum than I'm going to think in terms of prompt, because the receptive task itself doesn't seem very compatible with manding for a color. But if I know his preference, like I said, is for red and green M&Ms and not for blue and white, then I could be telling him to red, and he's going to receptively touch it, green, receptively touch it. I'm not going to have him receptively choose blue and white, but now I'm going to put the M&M in front of the receptive so that I'm going to say red, and instead of touching the card, I'm hoping he's going to touch the M&M itself and take it as a food item. And now I want to, with momentum, say after 3 trials of practice, put it out there and see if just the momentum, making up a case with a child, a certain child with that practice 3 trials in a row with a correct receptive response, that may now be momentum for him to vocally request the color. If it's not, then with our receptive tasks, very much to back up a step, what we're often seeing is that children with practice across days, they're very likely to vocalize while they're doing a receptive task. So I'm saying red, and he starts imitating me red, especially I've been teaching red as an imitation. And so I may have needed to work more carefully on ensuring that when I do a receptive task, he always does vocalize the SD. In response, it's not required to vocalize, but I'm going to either differentially reinforce vocalization with a receptive compliance, or perhaps not add that as part of the contingency. So now again, if I go to momentum, I want him to request red or green M&M. I'm going to start off with several trials of receptive, red, green. He says red and green. And now I'm hoping on, say, on the 4th trial or the 5th trial, I don't do the receptive task. And with a little time delay, looking at him, and he's looking at the M&Ms and he says red. And if not, with the time delay, I'm going to prompt it by doing another receptive task. And at this point, I'm adding in a contingency, like, you can do it receptively, I'm not going to give you the M&M, but you spontaneously say red and you're getting the M&M. I know we're over time now, so I just, by 5 minutes, I got some reinforcement for being punctual, but I'll let Victor be the judge of timekeeping.
So I need to close, or?
Yeah, whatever you think is culturally appropriate.
Okay. I just want to finish your question. I think that concerning the behavioral receptive momentum for the expressive response is going to be very helpful. And concerning those intervals where we want to make the child understand that, I would work on kind of delay concerning time. What I mean is that I show you some objects with different colors, and I ask you for the color of an object sometime later. Well, when I would ask you for a color, and you have to spend some time until you respond, just waiting or just doing another different task. Any other question? Oh, Twitter, the one thing that I showed you. Yeah, because I was send them. Okay,
We can send a link to the Twitter.
We will send the link to.
I think we could.
Yeah, there are a couple of tweets from Mona Sapp, where we can find these tools. I think that she's talking about ELAP and curriculum assessment, right? And any resource, and she's asking for any resources that that we can recommend that would be much appreciated. Perhaps toward the end of the workshop. Sorry for interrupting. You're not interrupting, Mona. So I think that we will respond the Twitter, that tweet with a link about language magic, using it as a tool, and probably some other tools to pay attention if you want to make some kind of some detailed assessments. Well, thank you so much for your attention, for being so patient, especially with me, my English. Thank you so much to Eric. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to learn from you. Y gracias por vuestra paciencia también. Y nada, espero que nos veamos pronto y cualquier cosa, pues aquí tenéis nuestro contacto y cualquier cosa que os podamos ayudar, aquí nos tenéis. Gracias.